1. The raw nature of an economic crisis, a deep-spoken narrative. An economic crisis? People talk about it like it's some big mysterious event, but if you strip away all the fancy words, it's actually very simple. An economy is just like a human body. It has good days, bad days, and if you push it too hard, it collapses. A crisis is that moment when the system, which looked perfectly fine from the outside, suddenly breaks down. Not because something magical happened, but because it's been running beyond its limits for too long. We pump money. We borrow more than we can handle. We inflate asset prices to levels that don't make sense. And everyone convinces themselves that nothing will ever go wrong. That growth is eternal. That this time is different. But the truth, when people start believing in something unreal, it only takes one small shock to bring the whole thing crashing down. A crisis happens when money stops moving. Not because it disappears, but because people freeze. They lose trust. Banks don't lend. Businesses don't spend. Investors sell everything they can. Everyone retreats into survival mode. The money is still in the system, but it refuses to flow. It becomes scared, defensive, silent, and when money stops moving, the entire economy stops breathing. That's the raw truth. A crisis exposes everything we've been hiding. Companies that looked strong were living on debt. Markets that looked stable were carried by hype. Banks that claimed to be safe were fragile all along. A crisis is like a mirror. It forces the world to see itself without the makeup, without the optimism, without the lies we tell ourselves. And the painful part is this. Only during a crash do we realize we were living on leverage, on borrowed time, on illusions of endless growth. In the end, a crisis isn't some monster coming out of the dark. It's the natural consequence of human behavior. Greed when things go up, fear when things go down, and the belief that the economy can grow forever without ever stopping to breathe. That, right there, is the bare, unfiltered nature of every economic crisis. 2. The real causes. The brutally honest version, you know. Economic crises don't just appear out of nowhere. They don't crash through the door uninvited. They grow, quietly, slowly, right under our noses. And we only notice them when they're already too big to stop. And when you look deep enough, the causes are painfully simple. 1. Cheap money for too long. When interest rates stay low for years, the whole system becomes addicted. Cheap money makes everyone think they're a genius. Businesses borrow more. Investors borrow more. Governments, they borrow the most. And as the borrowing piles up, asset prices float higher and higher. Not because they're worth more, but because money lost its meaning. It's like blowing air into a balloon every single day and pretending it won't pop. But it always pops. And when it does, the people who celebrated the easy money are never the ones paying the price. The public is. 2. Leverage. The silent killer. This is how economies collapse from the inside out. Everyone builds on debt. Layer on layer. Loan on top of loan. A skyscraper of promises standing on a foundation of sand. It looks strong until the wind changes. And when asset prices fall just a little, the whole machine panics. Margin calls hit. Banks freeze. Forced selling begins. And one collapse triggers the next, like a long line of dominoes that no one can stop. Crises don't happen because people lack money. Crises happen because people borrowed too much while believing nothing could go wrong. 3. Liquidity disappears. This is the moment the room goes cold. One morning, you wake up and realize the asset you believed in, that everyone believed in, has no buyers. Not because it's worthless, but because everyone is afraid. Liquidity disappears the same way people faint. Suddenly, silently, with no warning. Markets become a burning building with only one exit. And everyone runs toward that door at the exact same second. The ones who get out survive. The rest get crushed. It's not about logic or valuation or long-term fundamentals. It's about pure panic. 4. Trust collapses. Trust is the currency of finance. Once it breaks, everything else follows. One bad headline, one bank failure, one CEO scandal, and suddenly the entire market remembers how fragile the world really is. Humans panic in herds. When the market is green, everybody says, "Relax, everything's fine." But when it turns red, they sell, not because the asset changed, but because someone else is selling. And once confidence cracks, no economic model, no interest rate, no rescue package can fix the human mind. The raw truth? Crises don't start the day the market crashes. They start years earlier. With cheap money, too much debt, vanishing liquidity, and a slow erosion of trust. By the time the world realizes what's happening, the crisis is already living inside the system. Growing. Waiting. And that's the part no one likes to admit. 3. The raw consequences. A deep, storytelling version. A financial crisis. It's not just charts crashing or headlines screaming. It hits quietly at first, then violently, and it always lands hardest on the people who can't afford to defend themselves. Let me tell it to you the way it really feels. 1. Businesses don't die because they have no customers. They die because they run out of cash. This is the cruel truth. A company can still have orders coming in, still have clients, still have a decent product, and yet collapse overnight. Why? Because the moment cash stops circulating, everything freezes. Bills pile up. Banks start calling. Suppliers demand payment. The whole chain begins to crack. In a crisis, profit doesn't matter. Cash does. And once cash dries up, even a healthy business suffocates. That's the first punch of every recession. 2. The poor get poorer, and the rich somehow walk out richer. It sounds unfair, maybe even cruel, but it's one of the most consistent patterns in economic history. When markets fall, people with small savings panic. They start selling whatever they have, land, gold, stocks, not because they want to, but because they have to. Fear forces the sale. Debt forces the sale. Bills force the sale. And when everybody's selling, prices collapse. That's when the wealthy step in. Calm, patient, liquid, and quietly buy everything at a fraction of its real value. A crisis doesn't create inequality, it magnifies it. And every collapse ends with assets moving from the scared to the powerful. 3. Governments print money, but the money never reaches the people. This is the part that stings the most. After every crash, central banks pump liquidity into the system, slash interest rates, inject billions to save the economy. But the money doesn't flow to ordinary families. It flows to banks, corporations, financial institutions, markets. It is used to stabilize the system, not to stabilize household lives. And when this new cheap money floods financial markets, stocks rise, real estate rises, commodities rise. Who benefits? The people holding assets. Who doesn't? The people just trying to survive. The crisis ends, but the cost of living stays high and the recovery never feels like it belongs to the average person. 4. The system recovers. But people don't recover at the same speed. GDP bounces back. Corporate earnings rebound. Markets turn green again. But the people, they carry the aftershocks much longer. Fear of losing a job, fear of spending, fear of investing again, fear of repeating the same pain. A crisis leaves a mark that numbers can't measure. Economies heal fast. Humans heal slowly. And sometimes one financial hit can set a family back 5 years, 10 years, or an entire generation. 5. One bad decision made in fear becomes a long-term destiny. This is the most painful consequence. When people panic, they make desperate choices. Selling at the bottom, closing a business too early, stopping investments right before the rebound, liquidating assets that should have been kept. One mistake made in fear can shape the next decade of someone's life. That's why the wealthy wait for crises. Because fear creates opportunities. And the everyday person tries to run from crises. Because fear destroys stability. In the end, the raw truth is this. A crisis is a quiet reshuffling of power. No violence, no smoke, no battlefield. Just money quietly changing hands. Assets silently moving. Strong players absorbing the weak. And those who control liquidity walking out stronger than before. That's the real aftermath of every financial crisis. Not the headlines, but the human reality that follows long after the charts recover. You know, every financial crisis out there, it doesn't just happen by accident. At first, it looks like chaos, random, uncontrollable. But if you look closer, there's a pattern, and it's the same pattern every single time. See, not everyone benefits from a crash. In fact, most people lose. But there's a group, a small group that always walks away richer, big cash, control over money flows, connections with central banks. They buy the market cheap when everyone else is panicking. That's who I mean when I say the elite, the financiers, the invisible hand behind the curtain. And here's the thing, they're never the ones holding the risky bets. They're the ones selling them.